don't believe in random numbers. All numbers are for some mathematical laws, and then it appears to be that this group of people are not randomly appeared in this room, because we're looking at the posts, online posts, and all the discussions and the responses that we're receiving. So there is stereotypical and the common problems that we all experience is probably one of the reasons why we're all here. We sign up for the program or have somewhat interest, because we have the same, consciously or subconsciously, we are trying to move to the directions that bring us to the better place.
Absolutely. And I like how you've got the high road there, which is that you're solutions focused. If you're in this room, then you're being proactive about your future. This is professional development, but it's also personal development, because they are related.
And it's also what feels good about this group of people, that we all want to be high value, not females, but high value person.
Sure.
Either at work or at home in our professional lives. And then being in control of your own life is one of the signs of being high value.
Control being associated with your personal value. Yes, I definitely drank that Kool-Aid. Until I wasn't able to control my circumstance anymore. And then I had to find a different place to source my value. And wow, is that a journey that I still walk every day. Side note, the numbers that I shared with you just now are very much in alignment with women in the workforce in the country. So your experience, all this is to say that you're not alone. Your experience is very common for women in the workforce right now. Any other thoughts or reactions?
Just a question. This is the United States. Do you have any data around elsewhere or countries in which it's different?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that, and I do want to share some of my research data on ways that women and Americans are viewed differently in different places. Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely, I hope that I will be able to answer your question with a slide that's coming up, but just in general, yes. Whereas in the United States, we measure our gross domestic product. Mm-hmm. In other countries, they measure something called the gross happiness quotient. Imagine that. And what would our gross happiness quotient be in the US? Maybe worth looking into. So that's a great question.
Just a question
Yeah.
as well. Is there any year-over-year data to show increase or decline in these statistics? I'm just wondering, because if we look back 10 years to where women are today, are we seeing an upward northeasterly trajectory?
Yeah, so there's a whole body of research that suggests that as our gender roles shift, so does equity in the workplace. And so what I'm talking about there is the ways that women are looked at as professionals, the kinds of opportunities, and then the kinds of hurdles that we have to overcome in order to reach the same level of success as our male counterparts. It's still 71 cents to the dollar? 80. Is it 80 now? 80 cents to the dollar. So we're making progress, but none of us can stand here and say that there's total equity. Now, we just listened to a fantastic lunchtime interview with a woman who shared that she feels like she has more opportunities for success in this country than where she comes from. So clearly the cultural context is going to affect the way that women are seen and treated and valued. And that's going to be specific to each country, but it's also going to be specific to cultural centers. Where I come from in Seattle, women are regarded differently than where I currently live now in North Idaho. It's different, and you can feel it, and it's subtle, and there's micro examples. And we have to learn how to traverse the landscape that we find ourselves in. My grandmother used to say, bloom where you're planted, Katie. So it's different, and we learn how to act differently when we're in different company, and that's part of our own ability and our executive functioning to be successful in different environments. Good. So let's get a little bit of vocabulary under our belts here. And I want to talk about why I'm choosing the word integration instead of balance. So we've all heard of work-life balance, but balance makes me think of a game of Jenga, where you have these blocks which are discrete roles that we carry, our hats, different parts of ourselves, and they're all stacked on top of each other, and if one of them comes down, then it affects all the others and the whole thing can come down, but they are very different, each of them different. It also, balance makes me think of a scale, and it makes me think of either I am in balance or I'm not. And that's not totally true in our reality. In our reality, our work, our personal or professional lives are not discretely separate. They're intertwined, right? So, for example, have you ever taken a business phone call while you were making a school lunch for a child? Or have you ever had a family member call when you were in a business meeting or in school? Yeah, our personal and professional selves are not distinctly different. It's not like when I pull up after a day of running my company, I take off the professional hat, put on the personal hat, walk in the door and become a completely different person. Although sometimes it feels like I'm expected to do that. It's not in our nature. So balance indicates a binary structured society. Either we're not in balance or we are. And that is a difficult place for us to live in when most of us exist on a spectrum, a grayscale, and we're somewhere in the middle. Some parts of us are in balance, some parts of us are not in balance. And it shifts all the time, doesn't it? So I use integration. Integration is a more holistic term which requires us to create a relationship between the many roles that we carry in a way that allows them to be interdependent and fluid. Emphasize the word relationship. So integration requires a relationship that allows our personal and professional sides to be interdependent and fluid. And in the age of technology, where there are so many people now working, they're telecommuting, they're working on location, we are able to multitask. It's part of what we're required to do as women, as humans, is to be able to do multiple things at the same time. And so having these discrete parts become interconnected, become interdependent and fluid, makes sense as a life skill for being successful in an increasingly digitized age. All right, so let's dive into the data. I'm trained as a sociologist, and my passion for research is around identity. So I want to share a couple of things with you today that I think are really interesting. Number one is that according to the US Census data, on average, Americans work 167 hours per year more than we did a decade ago. 167 hours is more than a month of full-time work in a calendar year. Extra on top of what we used to work 10 years ago. That's a lot. When are we doing that work? Well, have you ever answered emails after 5 p.m.? We're finding ways to sneak in work outside of the 9 to 5. According to the Yale Center on Stress, stress chemicals shrink the brain and lead to diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia later on in life. And more people are showing up with these diseases at earlier ages. And the Yale Center is saying that that is linked to stress. On top of that, as women, we also have to navigate unconscious bias. And I know that you've been studying unconscious bias in this program, so you know what that means. For me, what it means is that there's a lens that we are viewed that is different than the lens through which males are viewed. And that changes our opportunities and it changes our choices. For example, while more women are in college and graduating college than men right now, we come home to what's called the second shift. And for me, the second shift used to look like I would come home from running my company to a sink full of dishes, and a refrigerator that needed to be stocked with groceries, and dinner that needed to be made, and diapers that needed to be changed. I'm talking about domestic chores that are often given to women because historically they were seen as women's work. Now, I've done a lot of work to create more equity in my own life, and I have some ideas on how to do that within relationship as well. But more often than not, as we as women, we have what is the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs. Our professional obligations and our personal obligations. Now, if you look at the bottom line, we'll see the effects of all of these causes on the top line. The first one is that there was a $300 billion loss due to U.S. employee absenteeism due to overwork last year alone. What that means is people who are stressed out and exhausted so they have to take a mental wellness day. Or people who have stress-related illnesses and they have to take work time off to go get a procedure. Or folks who have to be with family and loved ones who are stressed and exhausted and need health help. Because of all this overwork, this has actually affected our GDP, and it's caused a $300 billion per year loss. And according to global indicators, the U.S. does rank at the top in terms of our national debt, that's per capita, our debt per person, as well as our obesity rates, as well as our addiction rates, as well as our pharmaceutical purchasing. We rank at the top globally. Where we don't rank at the top, where we actually rank at the bottom, is in terms of our work and family balance or integration. That is our quality of life. So, what can we take away from all this? I think what we can take away from this is that while Americans are working more and they are getting more stress and their brains are producing more stress chemicals and women are working more and pushing, it is not necessarily showing up as more happiness. Our overwork is not translating to more happiness. So then maybe it is time that we start looking at the gross happiness quotient and thinking about what would produce quality of life. And for many of us, looking at this data can create a whole host of emotions, from bitterness to resentment to anger to, this is kind of a dismal situation. But the good news is that it's changing, and that it is changing one individual at a time, and that there are movements of people who are mobilizing and changing this situation so that there's more of an emphasis on quality of life. And that has to happen at the policy level, at the education level, at the medical level, at the familial level. It's a systemic problem that requires a systemic solution. Any questions so far? Did I answer your question about the data? Yes. Okay, so we've arrived at the big question here, which is how can we as leaders create an environment that allows us to be innovative, and I would also say authentic, and doesn't keep us stuck doing things the way we have always done them. In other words, can we have it all? And if so, what would that even look like? Well, we know that we cannot change things by doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we have to begin to think creatively and think outside the box. And the best way that I know how to do that is by playing games. So I want to play a game with you today. And your goal for the game is to just play, have fun, and enjoy. Sound good? Okay. All right, so in a moment I'm going to give you some directions. And I'm only going to say the directions once because I know that you're good leaders and leaders are good listeners. So I think since we have 3 tables here, then we'll just have 3 teams. That'll be easiest. We have 5, 6, and 5. That works. And that's set up to mirror real life, which is that it's not always fair. So we have 3 teams, and I'm going to give you